Hello, all my beautiful people. It is time once again for another amazing episode of If You Give a Dad a Podcast. So this week I have with me a guest that I've been working to get on here for a little bit now. I know I say that a lot, but I try to plan these out as far in advance as I can. But this is a very busy man that I had the privilege of talking to. In fact, they call him the hardest working man in the business, and that is the Space Cowboy Jason Jones. This is a man who I've seen wrestle a couple times, and I've got to talk to a few times here recently, and we finally were able to get him on the show, and I am very excited for you guys to be able to hear this episode. So for those people who are here just to hear the Jason Jones episode, I hope that you enjoy yourself, and I hope that you stick around and maybe find some other episodes that you like as well. The more the merrier. So if you guys are as excited as I am, then let's get this show on the road.
If You Give a Dad a Podcast. Hey, Dad.
Get back in your car! Go! Get out of here! You can't be here!
I wasn't about to call you Dad, so.
Seriously?
Just for the work rate, brother.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she said he looked like an old piece of leather.
Wow.
Supernatural, which is by far one of my favorite shows, and I will be talking a lot about Supernatural. I will be quoting Supernatural.
Bro.
I just remember they also, everybody, whenever they came to the ring, goes, ooh, 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 ooh.
What? Okay, before I get started, have you ever had an idea for a design that you wanted to put on a shirt, hat, tumbler, or even a puzzle? Well, over at R&L Designs, they can make those ideas come true. For the month of August, all ready to ship or local pickup t-shirts and can glasses with bamboo lids are $10 each plus shipping. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram, as well as Etsy for digital designs. I'll have a link to all of their pages in my show notes. Go check them out for all of your custom needs today. Alright everybody, so today I have with me a guy that I have been talking to back and forth for, I'd say, maybe a few months now about getting him on the show. He is a very busy man. In fact, they call him the hardest working man in the business. He is the owner and promoter for Mid-States Wrestling, and I am talking about the Space Cowboy Jason Jones. Man, how are you doing today?
Man, you finally got me nailed down to an afternoon. So, yeah, that's awesome. I'm great. I'm glad to be here, man. I'm excited.
I am definitely excited to have you here. So, you have been at this for a little bit. I've been kind of looking into your background with Mid-States Wrestling and all that, and it looks like you started in 2003 with the Mid-States, or that's when the company was started. How did you get into all of that?
Well, honestly, I broke in my senior year. I started training, and I was working for a radio station here in town. Mm-hmm. And I always wanted to get my foot in the door. So local promotion came through, and I kind of distantly knew a guy because there wasn't a lot of feds back then. There wasn't a lot of training schools. There was like 4 in the nation, and
right.
Pro wrestling didn't come around a lot. And when I did, he was like, yeah, man, I went to, he got trained by Adrian Street in Florida. And he came back up this way and wanted to promote a show. We loosely knew each other, and he knew I was a big wrestling fan. I was getting the radio business, and he said, man, he goes, do you want to help me? We're going to do this fundraiser here. And he goes, man, you could help me do whatever. And I was like, yeah, man, let's try this out. And I showed up that day, and my first ever job. Now, keep in mind, I'm 17 years old. Mm-hmm. My first job in pro wrestling was playing the music for the wrestlers. And now it's not as extravagant back then as it is today, where you play on a laptop and music and lights and smoke. It was literally in a gymnasium, so the guys were on the opposite end, and they had a PA system up front in the office. You would hold the microphone to the tape player. Guys would bring you a tape player, cassette tape for you children at home, and it would be queued up to the song of where they wanted it to play. So that was back in the day. So you're
wow.
95, 96.
Uh-huh.
So everybody's fighting over Welcome to the Jungle and LaGrange, for God's sake. So you can be like, well, you can't use that. So-and-so's already turned in Welcome to the Jungle today. So you would hit play, hold the microphone to the thing, and it would, and the guy would, he was like, now, here's what you do. Let the guy get in the ring, make his little circle, stand up on the turnbuckle pad, blah, 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 and then, like, just kind of turn the volume down, fade it down. I'm like, okay, cool. Then you would play the next guy. But he wouldn't tell me, because I was just a teenager, he wouldn't tell me who was going to win. You know, he wouldn't tell me who was going over.
Right.
So I had to kind of keep, rewind both tapes to the spot during the match and have it ready at any given time. So he made me watch from across the arena. And so it was really quick. You had to do that tape trade really quick. Hit play. But as you saw, I kind of stuck with it, and I knew more than I thought I did. He, kind of smartened me up a little bit here, a little bit there. But and that's just kind of how I got my foot in the door, and that's what you had to do back then. They had to see that you were serious, you were going to help them do whatever. And whether it was hand out programs, set up chairs, tear down the ring, set up the ring, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was just happy to be a part of it. So the next time when I was my senior year and a different group came to town, and I was kind of apprentice from the radio station, like, get in touch with Jason, man. He's all about wrestling, blah, 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 and I think he's done a couple things. So promoter came to town, and he was like, hey, do you want to announce? And I'm like, yeah. And he got to the back, and I remember like my first big name I worked with was like Jake the Snake and Greg Valentine on the card.
Oh, cool.
And he was like, hey, I've got like 6-7 shows coming up. Do you want to come do this for us? And I was like, do I want to go on the road at 18 years of age and pursue a lifetime career? Yes. So the agreement I worked out with the promoter was, hey, I'll show up early. Would you let me get in there with the guys and let them bump me around and just not fully train me, but, show me some bumps, show me some this, show me some that. And I was kind of already kind of smart to some stuff. And,
right.
And so that's kind of how I started getting my foot in the door. And back then it wasn't like it is now. Wrestling's for everybody now and all this stuff and safety. And no, they got in there and they had a 300-pound dude that was 6.5 foot tall run at me with everything I had and hit me with a clothesline and hit me right across the mouth and busted my mouth wide open, see if I could get up and take another, to see if I would come back the next week and do it again. And that's how they weeded you out back then. But, now in a PC world we live in, that doesn't exist, but they wanted to see if you were tough and if you could make it back then. And 25 years later, I guess I'm still stupid because I'm still getting punched in the mouth. So here I am.
Well, that's awesome, man. And it was a different world back then, even, I'm 34, and it's even changed so much just since I've grown up, it's become even,
oh yeah, man.
I guess you could say softer even,
yeah,
just from what I see.
I was talking to my doctor last week. I went into, or a couple weeks ago, excuse me. I went into every year, you renew your physicals, your blood work and all that stuff, your different licenses and your states. And
yeah.
I happened to go to school with this guy, and he was a couple years behind me, and he was always into track and field and stuff and in school. And he even did track and field for the University of Arkansas. And he's a super nice guy. He's down to earth. He's kind of like me. We have kind of the same sense of humor and everything. Cool dude. Uh-huh. And we're just talking. We were talking about how he was volunteer to coach and how he asked me how I did it, because I still train guys, I have the boxing gym and I train a lot of wrestlers. I train pro wrestlers.
Right.
And we were just talking about how patience and how it was changed. And like back when we were kids growing up in the 80s and 90s, like your football coach threw football at your head if you weren't paying attention,
Exactly.
And they called you the P word and they called you this. And like, you did that to a kid now, number one, you would be fired. Number two, you would be like blackballed from ever coaching any kind of organized sport or anything at all again. So there's definitely a lot more snowflakes involved, but there's a lot more PC, culture. And I was like, it wasn't like that when I grew up, man. It was like, quit being it was nothing for your 7th grade coach to cuss you out in front of everybody. I'm like, that'll make them stronger, damn it.
Exactly.
So I still have that mentality of some extent, but as you get older, you mature and you change. And I've just found out a process of elimination of ways that I coach that works.
Yeah.
But I've also found that there's a term that a lot of teachers or coaches use, and is someone coachable? Are they trainable? And that's usually one of the first questions I ask any one of my students that starts training with me is, have you ever played an organized sport? Have you ever taken any type of martial arts? And it's not that they have to, but they give you that respect. They give you that eye contact, that respect that you give a coach. And some kids have never done that because we're in a day and age where that's not really encouraged anymore. You know, it's stick your nose in your tablet or your phone, and you know, you're looking at them and they're wandering around, their eyes are wandering, they're not giving you respect. They're social ineptness, you know what I mean? And it's I try to be as patient as I can, but also I think a lot of that comes back to parenting. You know, they throw a tablet in front of their kid. There's nothing worse than going to a restaurant. I hate this because I know that there's some kids with special needs, but like, there's nothing worse than going to a restaurant and taking your family out to eat, and then like the table next to you has a kid that has a tablet like blaring at 80 decibels, SpongeBob or something like that. And I'm like, put some headphones on the kid for God's sakes. We're dropping $100 here for 4 of us to eat, for God's sake. You know, get your kids chicken tendies to go at the Applebee's, because I don't want to be bothered by this right now. We're trying to have, you know, and I'm like, it's the world has changed, and I'm just a grizzled old vet, and I'm an asshole sometimes for saying that. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cuss on that. I don't know if I could cuss or not, but
you're all right.
So, I'll try to keep it minimal. I'll just say the A word one time, so hopefully that'll be it. But
that's fine.
Man, definitely it's a changed world we're in right now.
Yes, it is. So you were talking about some of the people that you trained. I've actually had a few of your trainees on my show, and really great guys. I had the Johnnies on here, and they had nothing but good to say about you.
Oh, the Johnnies.
Yeah.
They had what? They had negative stuff to say?
Oh, no, they had nothing but good to say about you. They were great guys, and they talked about how...
As I tell them, I all the time, if we're on a road trip, I'm like, you know, you're my favorite Johnny. And then I'll turn around and say it to the other one. And I'm like, that's why I don't like you as much as I like the other one. And it's just a constant game that we have back and forth. But I won't interrupt you. Go ahead, hit the list, man. Play my hits, man. I've got some good hits out there.
Yeah, I mean, they're some great guys, and they kind of were talking about how, you know, training with you, everything is kind of is a throwback. It's an old school type of training and stuff that you don't really get to see that much anymore. So, you know, I think that's a good thing that, you know, I was raised by a older generation than most people my age, and so I see and appreciate the other side of it, whereas a lot of these PC people maybe don't. I still see that there is value to having some of these older ways of doing things. I mean, there was a reason why they did it that way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's like I told them, you know, and I've trained several people, and I'm like, there are other people that will never make it. There are other people that I have wrestled some of these places where I look at a guy and I'm in a match with him. This guy wouldn't even be, I mean, there's nowhere near he should be in a ring. You know, this guy's still not fully trained. And we get into a lot of places. This guy, you know, let me give you the family tree of that. This guy was halfway trained by this guy. That was halfway trained by this guy. That was halfway trained by this guy. So what kind of knowledge does that get when you're getting half of half of half of half of half?
They're only a 16th trained.
Yeah, man. I'm in a main event with a guy, and they're trying to do like a 4-way match in the middle of Kansas, and they throw this kid in there because he came in there and rode with so-and-so, and it was like, and I was like, okay, man, just listen to me out there. And this kid's like, and I can tell he's nervous and he's full of crap anyway. So I'm like, we'll lock up, and he's like, and a lockup is, and I'm like, are you kidding me? This kid doesn't know how to do a collar and elbow tie up, and I'm like, that's stuff we do on day one.
Oh no!
And I just kind of looked at the promoter, and I'm like, you know, I have a family to get back to. I make a living doing this for 20, and this guy wants to come and play wrestler. Well, I can guarantee you, just like the old guys when I broke in, you're not going to play wrestler on my watch.
No.
I still think that barricade separates the people that need to be watching the show. And I have great respect for fans.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also people that try to cross that barricade and they're like, I'm a wrestler. Wrestling's for everybody. No, it's not. Because at any given time, you're 1 inch from paralysis.
Yeah.
You give me something that you're not confident in doing. What happens if you break my arm and I'm out for 6 months and I can't provide for my family?
Right.
So do I stress the fundamentals that have been in place for over 100 years? Absolutely. Am I a shortcut to get in the wrestling business? Absolutely not. I've had guys quit because they can't take it with us, and they try to go somewhere else and be like, well, I was trained here for a little bit, and I'm, no, they want a shortcut. They want to wait in the business. They want a way to play wrestler in front of their family and friends for a show or two. And guess what? I found that in 25 years, those guys don't last. Those promotions don't last. But hey, I'm still here. I'm still training people. I'm still getting people contracts. Yeah. These guys they're wrestling in 7-8 states, and they're collecting belts everywhere they go. So, I'll pat myself on the back all day long, but there's just a handful of decent trainers out there still left that stick with that old school mentality, that actually make the guys pay their dues and make them still put the work in. Because if you put the work in, you'll appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah, no, I that makes total sense to me. Like you said, there's a reason why. You don't want to have somebody come in there, because that's when you have somebody who's barely trained, that's even more dangerous.
Absolutely.
They, like you said, they could hurt you. And the one thing that people on the outside don't always realize is you got to protect each other. And how can you do that if they don't even know how to do, basic moves?
Yep, you're exactly right, man. And I've been in there with a bunch of them, and those are the ones that I don't. It's still in a business where it very much in the back, it was very much a controlled society. You picked up the phone and dare say the word blackball, but someone didn't exist. And what the problem you have now is you have promoters going into business that would have never made it past day one back in the day.
Yeah.
So their way of a shortcut into the business, let's start a promotion and we'll book this person and this and this and this, and then I'll work myself onto the card.
Yeah.
Those people should be flushed in the toilet.
Yep.
These tax time promoters and things like that. And, everybody wants to know the secret to doing it, like the longevity of my career, the longevity of mid-states wrestling and running hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shows over 20 years. It's simple. Stick with what works. Professional wrestling. Don't shortcut it. Don't hot shot it. Don't try to throw people on there that don't belong, because hey, if this person comes out and spends their hard-earned money to take the whole family out, and I put some jackass that's not trained in there in a pair of gym shorts and tennis shoes, how does that make my product look?
Right.
Makes it look like crap.
Yeah.
And if you're wrestling on that card, do they take anybody seriously if that's one of the guys on the card? Heck no, man. Mm-hmm. So have some daggum pride. And if promoters would stop booking these halfway trained guys, these guys that aren't really trained, these, wannabe, I call them cosplay wrestlers, spot monkeys. They just need to be flushed down the toilet.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot greater world, and you would start getting a better product. Houses would go up all the way around, but what do I know? I'm just a grizzled old guy that makes a living off this business. So
speaking of the Mid-States Wrestling, like I said, you started that in 2003. Am I right?
02.
Oh, 02. Okay.
It was 2002. I think we did a free show was our first one.
Okay.
I think our copyright is 02. Yeah, but yes, sir. It goes back a ways.
So, what made you decide to start your own wrestling promotion?
It was kind of a work with a couple groups of other guys. Mm-hmm. I was going and traveling, and there weren't a lot of great promotions. I mean, I hate to say that. There were some, there's always one good one out of the group, but they were inconsistent.
Right.
So instead of trying to, they would start, and then they would do a couple shows, and partnerships would fail. Guy would get a divorce, so he'd lose his company or this or that. And I worked hundreds of shows before I ran my own promotion, and I am a classic note taker. One thing that always allowed me to bring the top talent to mid-states was I would still wrestle and go and travel. And I would watch all the matches on the card and say, this guy's good. But, man, he could have a hell of a match if I put him up against this guy that I worked with in Tennessee last week. They could do a heck of a program. So I was always making mental notes. And I would watch ways, not just – there's a lot to run the promotion more than just the matches that you put in the ring, down to the way that the people promoted, down to the way that people sold tickets, down to the way they ran their concession stand, the way they sold their merchandise. And I took those notes of those dozens and dozens of promotions that I worked for, what made them successful, what made them negative, what was a good idea, what was kind of a good idea but could use a little tweaking, then what could be set in stone, this should be the gold standard. And I took those gold standards and I used to keep a notebook of just an old, broke down like notebook, $1 from Walmart. And that thing was just always falling apart. But I would go and I'd go wrestle a double shot on the weekend and do one in Missouri and then wrestle one in Kansas. And I would take notes. And, hey, this promoter didn't spend any money on radio, but he had a big story ran in the newspaper, and he did flyers, and he went to the local pizza restaurant, and all the pizza restaurants, they put little mini flyers on all their to-go boxes of pizza. And, just little things. They had a really good idea on the concession stand. Instead of doing this and this and this, they just did this. And, I would travel different places, and wrestlers and promoters will tell you alike. You will go to stuff like, I got to go to a wedding this weekend, but I would go to events and be like, go to your cousin's wedding or something like, this would be a good wrestling venue. If that light fixture wasn't here, I could have a great show in here. But little things like that, I would travel all over and be like, this will be a cool venue. Or wrestle for a company, and then 15 years later, of course, nobody's ran that town in forever, and be like, hey, I wonder why no one's ran this before, and then go in, check out a venue, do a spot show there and see if it works out. And there's been shows that we've ran places that would have been considered a success, but maybe it's the area wouldn't support a full-time, indie fed to be there to run 4 or 5 shows a year. Maybe it's a one and done, once a year, a fundraiser kind of thing, or maybe twice a year. And there's places like that. Or there's a place that maybe you just need to run every 3 years when, somebody needs a fundraiser. And you start realizing that. We promoted boxing as well, boxing and MMA. And there's certain towns that it's not, maybe it's not a what would they call a money town, but maybe it's just something that they'd rather go to something else other than a boxing match or a wrestling match. Sometimes it just doesn't translate. And there's certain little things, certain little tricks that you pick up. And I've kept a great log of that stuff, but I've also kept it in my head. I made a lot of contacts from doing this for years. And I think that, getting back to the roundabout question of what made us start was kicking it around these guys that I traveled with that I had great connections with, like Craig Keesman and Michael Berry and these guys that I was making these towns with was, well, if we had a fed, this is what we would do. And we would take it back to basics. And I would do shows in the late 90s, and that's when wrestling was at an all-time high. I mean, you could literally put one poster up in a town that just said Wrestling National Guard Armory, Saturday night, 7 o'clock. There'd be 400 and 500 people show up because that was at the height of everything. The Monday Night Wars, Austin, everything. And then when people would show up and be like, yeah, it's not as good as I saw on TV, it would be packed. And the next time you would come back 8 months later, there'd be like 10 people in the crowd.
Oh, wow.
Because there'd be a promoter coming in to make a quick buck.
Yeah.
But my thing was, why not put on a good product so you could come back twice a year and then have a long-term business instead of just rolling into a town, trying to be a carny, making a quick buck and rolling out.
Yeah.
And that's what we wanted. We wanted a long-stay company. And if a company, we kind of did the math and we were like, if a company can make it 5 years, then that's something said. But a lot of companies don't make it past the 2-year threshold. And some companies will jump up and down. They're like, yeah, we did. And I'm like, Yeah, but you ran 4 shows a year, or, you ran one show, you took 3 years off, and then all of a sudden you did another one. Like, that doesn't make you a consistent. It's like when I talk to guys and like, yeah, man, I've been wrestling for 10 years. And I'm like, yeah, but during that 10 years, you've had 30 matches, dude. I had more than that in the last 3 months.
Right.
Guys want to, it's always bigger and better in their head. But we took what worked, and I wanted to go back to an old school thing. So right away, out of the bat, the very first show that we did was a TV taping. And we went back to that old school format of, we're going to do TV. We're going to bust this taping that we did up into 3, 1-hour shows with interviews, with backstage interviews, stuff like that. We'll go out, we'll sell the commercial time. We'll use X amount of commercial time to promote our next events coming back. We'll draw people with the matches that we're putting on to our big matches. And that was a good thing. We had our sponsorships coming in monthly on TV shows. And at one point we were the highest rated syndicated show in Northwest Arkansas, which that was really cool. And that was 2004, 2005.
Uh-huh.
But when you lose, when you lose a sponsor that's helping you out, paying $300-400 a month, helping you pay airtime, helping you pay this, and you lose that, and you try to go look for another one. Mm-hmm. When we were producing that much TV, I caught myself being in the studio 50 hours a week, doing voiceovers, doing graphics, and by that time, you're still trying to go out. If you're trying to do it on your own, you're trying to go out, sell sponsorships to new businesses, then maintain those sponsorships you have. And it may be a matter of, well, I went to go try to sell some sponsorships today. Well, I've got a Pizza Hut sponsorship over here, and they're wanting me to shoot a new ad for this new salad bar they have. So you were trying to do all of that on top of promoting the shows that were coming up and being in the studio, doing the graphics and doing the commentary over the things, little things like that. And I was burying myself. I was creating more work, but it was a great program. And people would come up to me and be like, man, we love watching your TV show. And I was like, well, thank you so much. You ought to come to the matches. And they're like, oh, we'll just wait till it comes on TV for free. And that's the mindset. Get older, and people grow up in this generation. They've always had YouTube, and they're not used to paying for anything. Back in my day, they told you to study tape. That's what you had to do. You had to go on eBay and buy a butt ton of tapes and study them. Now, if I want to watch a match, I can just type it in on YouTube, or I can go to Vince's network, type it in, and study someone. It's so easy. It's all at their fingertips. Mm-hmm. I can remember buying compilation tapes, Best of Eddie Gilbert, Best of the Midnight Express, and paying $20 for these things, popping them in my VHS, the VCR, and just watching them until over and over and over until they were almost worn the tape out on these things, and they were pretty rough too. They'd be a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of somebody, trying to bootleg the tape. Right. But we wanted a TV program, and that's what we had to do. Is I was like, well, that we're going to have a really big match, and it won't be on TV. And then people will be like, yeah, we'd rather sit at home and watch it for free. And I'm like, well, okay, well, shit. I realized that after we ran TV for like 7 years, and we were still breaking our backs to try to put out a program, it was good for us advertising our own stuff. But once we stopped running the TV show, our houses went up. Right. Because the formula had changed to what it used to be in the 70s and 80s with run TV and build those to your shows, and they'll come out. But in this day and age of instant gratification, you were competing with everything else now. Everything had changed. The landscape had changed. So I found out, hey, we take the TV show off. We just promote it. And those people that had fallen in love with your show and watched it religiously for 4 or 5 years, if they wanted to keep up with it, they were going to have to pay $15 to come out and watch, 10 or $15. Yeah. And it took a load off me, and I was able to take that time and effort that we were spending in the studio and trying to sell sponsors to actually put it back into promoting and traveling for me. And I turned down dozens and dozens of bookings a year, if not hundreds. Just because I'm so busy. But I also use that as, I'll go work this place and let me check on, hey, and they may tell me, hey, I've got a couple guys that you might want to think about bringing down your way. And sure enough, I'll go see them and see how they work, see how they're working in their area. And if I see one or two standouts, hey, come down and work for me. And, you know, I probably get 30 messages a week on Facebook and just everything else. Hey, can I come work for you? Hey, can I come work for you? And it's just like, hey, man, send me a promo picture, send me a bio, send me 2 matches. Send me one as you as a heel, one as a face. Let's take a look at them. And that also weeds out the guys that are like, well, I don't really have any matches on film, or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, so you're just, you're not really trained, you're just whatever, or just they come from just a pile of crap, or I say pile of crap, a crap promotion, whatever.
Yeah.
You weed those people out pretty fast, and usually, you know, the ones that do produce it, I have a lot more negative stuff to say about it than I do positive, but you never know. And there's been times where you have a plan for someone going ahead, and that you try to book long-term and not hot shot booking, but you have a long-term for someone, and then you're like, oh God, that person got hurt and they tore their ACL. They're going to be out for 10 months, 12 months.
Oh yeah.
Or this person's going to start a family, or their baby's mama doesn't want them playing wrestling anymore. And so a lot of things come into play, and people don't really give the booker credit for trying to make lemonade out of lemons. You know, I'm the guy reworking the card at 5:30, because in this day and age, all you have to say anymore is, oh, my wife possibly got exposed to COVID, I can't make it today.
Right.
You know, and you can't say boo about it, or you're a butthead, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's changed a lot too. So a lot of people will be like, hey man, why don't you, what's the card for, you know, 3 months from now? And I'm like, I've built one match, and the rest of them, you're going to see these 15 guys, but I'm not telling you what matches are. As it gets closer and I know I've got somebody locked in, sure, I'll advertise it. But nothing sets off and makes a Karen more than, hey, you were supposed to have, you know, Joe fight Andy, and Andy's not here. That's bad. You're like, yeah, man, Andy got COVID. Andy tore his shoulder.
Right.
Well, that's not cool. I want my money back. After you sit there and watch the entire show, they just want something to bitch about.
Exactly.
It's just like, you know, anybody that goes into a restaurant and they order a steak and they eat all the steak except for one bite, and they're like, well, that wasn't cooked the way I wanted it. Oh, do you want me to make you another steak? No, I want my money back for the one I ate. You know, it's people that have never ran a business or will ever run a business because they don't understand.
Right.
But that's a long answer to that question, but there you go.
Man, I love it. And you know, the thing is I didn't get to go to the Springfield show that you guys just had, but from what I saw,
you missed out, brother.
Man, I did. I missed out. And the funny thing was I was in Springfield on Wednesday, and but I was up there because my mom was having cataract surgery. But I didn't get to go to the show that you had up there. But just seeing the pictures from the show, you had a packed house, you know. And the thing is,
11 straight sellouts in a row.
How many?
11 sellouts in a row there. 11 in a row, man.
That is amazing. And, you know, I
put
talked.
The tickets on sale for November 12th when we come back. We put the tickets on sale that night.
Oh,
and
wow.
We sold 70 front row tickets that night for November. So it's a loyal fan group, but we got that by not hot-shotting and building good, consistent storylines and giving the people not just their money's worth, but more than their money's worth every show. So,
Yeah. And I was talking to Ryan Pilkington about it and everything, and he was just talking about how hot those fans are up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan's a hometown boy, and I've known Ryan for years. Ryan and his son Trey used to come to all the TCW shows. I was a part of TCW, and I'd say TCW back in the day was a strong number 3. You know, right behind, of course, you know, WWE and TNA and but I think at one point TCW was bigger than Ring of Honor. We had, you know, we're in 55 million homes, but Ryan would travel, and him and Trey would drive to Mississippi to watch those tapings and all the ones we did in Arkansas. And it was a great, great, great product, but I got to know them through there. And Ryan was always such a cool guy. And his son is actually a great amateur wrestler. I mean, just goes to championship after championship after championship. And Ryan was someone that I was buddies with, and I was like, hey man, I'm very picky about Ryan because I do a lot of announcing. That's people book me to announce, and I do announce a couple of charity events every year. I do the hosting of the Slap Fight Championship. So I'm very, very particular on announcing, and I try to set the bar high. So I work with Ryan quite a bit, and it just might be in the middle of him doing something and me going back watching the footage and be like, hey, next time don't do this, or me smarting him up on the fly. But Ryan does a great job. He's another one of those that I'm proud to say, like, trained from the ground up. We were doing that list earlier, and I think I interrupted you. Sorry about that, man.
Man, you're totally fine.
But yeah, Ryan's from up there, and he's absolutely right. That Springfield crowd is hot, and it's we even made the announcement. There was one guy in the crowd, and the guy was having a great time, but he was calling one of the wrestlers the P word.
Oh.
And we try to stress that. So I went out there, and he was like, hey, man. And I was like, yeah, I heard him. And I said, just make an announcement before the next match starts. Bring it down real low and say, look, guys, we want to stress to you this is a family show, and there are a lot of kids in there. We would ask you to please watch your language. And he said it just like he was talking to you or I, just like our friend.
Right.
And the crowd popped for it, which made that guy go, okay, maybe that's inappropriate to use because there's a bunch of 5- and 6-year-old kids here.
Yeah.
And it made him seem that at that point, there's 500 other people cheering for me not to say that. Maybe I won't say that the rest of the night. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So he's learning little tricks of the trade and a lot of little things that I'm smarting him up on. He's getting really good at his interviews, and he's still learning, but man, he's great. And he puts the extra time and extra work in, so I'm very, very proud of Ryan.
Yeah. He said that you were the one, like I said, I had him, I think it was last week is when his episode aired on here, and he told us that you were the one who gave him his opportunity at announcing and everything. So that's really cool. Now I kind of get to bring it full circle with having you on here to kind of talk about it as well.
Yeah, man.
So you really are the hardest working man in the business. And I see that because you've got your hand in just a little bit of everything, it seems like. Whenever I first asked you to come on the show, you said, well, can we hold off for a few months because I'm actually helping somebody campaign for, I guess it was a political office. And then,
yes, sir.
So, and then I see the things that you put on Facebook, like you're in the, what is it called? The Slap
Fight Championship.
Slap Fight Championship.
It's like 56 million views or something like that. It's crazy. We're on Fight. We do the pay-per-views.
That is
We've
insane.
Signed multiple contracts, but it was in Nashville a couple weeks ago at StarCast at Flair's last match.
Yes.
And this little girl just started screaming her head off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh my God, this girl's having a meltdown. And her mom, and she was like, can she take a photo with you? And I was like, oh, she has Space. She watched me wrestle like online, and they're like, she and her dad are the biggest slap fight fans in the world. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Been wrestling in spandex for 25 years, and now I'm the slap guy a lot of places, and I'll take it and run with it. But she even showed me, she was like in her, not really stroller, but her parents had like a little, deal they were pushing. She's like 5 years old or something.
Uh-huh.
She stood up and did the countdown for me where they take their hand and they count doing the 1, 2, 3. And she was like, after she took the picture with me, she was literally jumping up and down. She had just freaked out. And I was like, oh my God. And her dad was like, we literally watch Slap Fight every single day. We're digging up new clips to watch. And she just absolutely loves it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I have that young of a kiddo watching it. And I was, another one, I wrestled at a fundraiser for WFC, and I want to say it was not Pryor, Oklahoma, Wagner, Oklahoma. I think Wagner. And I just had a match, and it was when I was tag teaming with Paul Puerto Rico. We went to our merch table, and I'm signing autographs, and these two kids are playing on their phone, and they're probably like 14 and 13 or something. They're playing on their phone, and they keep looking at me. They're like eyeballing me, and I'm like, well, they're just wanting to take a picture or something. And they come up, and they're like, the guy's like, you're him. And I'm like, yeah, the guy that just had a match in the ring. He goes, no, you're the slap guy. And he pulls his TikTok video out, and I was like, he goes, man, we watch you on TikTok all the time. I'm like, dude, I didn't know I was on TikTok. And sure enough, man, like hashtag Jason Jones on his like, and he's like showing me all these footage, and I'm like, I had no idea.
That's
and
awesome.
then so we had to take a photo. He's like, man, he's like, I'm going to put this on Instagram. My buddies aren't going to believe this. We watch this all the time, and I'm like, that's crazy because these kids are at a wrestling show. They just obviously watched me wrestle, but the thing that was in their mind was this. Just random. Like I went to Wichita, Kansas one time, and I was doing an event for Jerry Bostic. Went to the mall before it started and ran into like Foot Locker. Was going to try to look for some shoes.
Uh-huh.
And I saw this guy, and he's like walking around. He's like looking at me, and I'm like, okay, this dude either wants to try to ask me out, or he's a wrestling fan. Because we run some events in Wichita.
Yeah.
And he goes, Space Cowboy. And I just turned around, and he goes, it is you. And I go, yeah, man, wrestling or slap fight? He goes, slap fight. And I'm like, okay, buddy. So then, like, we talked about slap fight for a minute, took a photo with him. And I'm like, now it used to just be cool that somebody noticed me out of context, not at a wrestling show. But now it's like, is it slap fight or is it wrestling that you know me for? So I know which way to steer this conversation. But
that's cool.
Yeah, my kids grew up all the way around wrestling, So being at shows was just it was a weekend thing for them. It was never a big deal. And I'm just dad. But like every now and then we would go to Walmart. We would go to Walmart or going to McDonald's to get your kid something after their baseball game or something. And a little kid, asked for your autograph or something. Then it would kind of dawn on them, oh, my dad does, some cool stuff. But it was always just like, meh,
Yeah.
But the one time my son freaks out and he's like, Dad, I'm listening to Moist Critical's podcast. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what that is. And he was like, Moist Critical, like Charlie. And I'm like, no clue. And he's like, he just talked about you for like 5 minutes on his podcast. And I'm like, I don't know who that is. And he like shows me this dude's got like 40 million followers or something. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. But to that day, like when my son is like 14 years old, that day Dad was cool. He grew up with Dad, wrestling in front of thousands of people, no big deal.
Yeah.
Good Lord, the gamer that he follows on Twitch talks about me because of slap fight, and I'm somebody cool that day. So it's pretty cool. I'm actually going to go do some voiceovers for him this week, and it's been an exciting ride because when he first approached me to it, I was like, JT, there's no way that this is going to catch on. This is just ridiculous. Am I actually doing this? And then when I saw like how captivating, because we started it before COVID, how captivating the crowds were, he was like, dude, we have to have you a part of this. And I laugh sometimes, but then I get caught up into it too. And I'm like, because he'll message me like, hey, so-and-so's not going to want to take the fight with the one guy. And I'm like, oh man, I was really hoping that would happen. I get caught up in it. And he uses me a lot to pull, with pro wrestlers, you kind of give them directions when you do a promo. Well, these are just regular Joe Blow guys.
Right.
They don't have they're just there to knock you the hell out.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I try to pull a little bit of personality out of them. I try to ask them questions because like, some of the first interviews I do, I'm like, hey, what's your strategy going into this fight? And they're like, to try to do good and try to win.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, big words there, and some of them will be live on pay-per-view, so you couldn't really do anything. But now I'm like, here's what I'm going to say to you. And I was like, don't hold back. Say this. Say it with a little more attitude, And I'd kind of get an idea of what they wanted to say, and I'd kind of lead them through an interview and try to pull out a little more personality. And as a sport, and I call it a sport because there's physical contact. I wouldn't want to do it.
No.
As the sport grows, the audience grows, the personalities grow. And I've just been lucky to be on since day one. And I'm glad that there's a lot of times that my crazy schedule doesn't line up with it.
Right.
And there's been times that we film from undisclosed locations. There's been times we've ended a 12:30 at night taping or 1 a.m. taping in undisclosed location. I've literally jumped on an airplane the next day to be back in Texas or to be back in Oklahoma or wherever, just I've had to do it a few times, but as the sport grows, I'm just happy to be a part of it. And it's just crazy. I know it's not a wrestling thing, but it's just random. And I really enjoy it though.
This show, we talk about everything. I just had a metal singer on last week, so we talk about everything on this show. So you're totally good.
Well, I'm a hodgepodge of about everything. I've got my hand in a little bit of everything, man.
Oh, and there's nothing wrong with that. It keeps you busy and it keeps you happy, doing all different kinds of things so you don't get bored.
Yes, sir.
So there is one other way that I know that you have been recognized, and this one's a little bit more personal to me, though. So my son's stepdad actually is the reason why I went to my first local wrestling show, and it was the Crown Championship Wrestling Show in Bentonville, Arkansas. And
Yeah.
so we went to that one. My son got your autograph, all that stuff. Well, his stepdad was like, man, he looks really familiar. Well, he used to work for a company that was a delivery service, and I guess he delivered wrestling belts to your house, and that's how he recognized you.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember talking to that guy. Yeah, we had ordered – the guy that does, like, our belts he's had a bad experience shipping with FedEx, and he doesn't want to ship UPS because they won't insure the belt high enough. So he ships, like, DHL or something. And DHL, where I'm at, they outsource a lot of that stuff. And sure enough, we had one of the belts that was for one of our tournaments, like, shipped here. And I was going to be out of town. I was, like, ready to leave, and the package was, like, supposed to be there already that day.
Right.
And I guess I remember talking to him because he went next door to deliver the belt. And I'm like, oh, my God, that's my DHL. I'm like, dude, that's mine. Is it heavy? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, okay. And he was like, what is that? And I'm like, I opened it up, and I'm like, it's a belt. And he's like, get out of town. So, like, when he told me that, I was like, it's such a small world, and here I am 2 hours from my hometown, and I'm here wrestling a show, and this dude remembers delivering a belt to my home in Harrison, Arkansas. So, it's crazy, isn't it? Small world.
It is a crazy small world. So both of my kids actually have something on their wall that's signed by you. My son has a Rey Mysterio mask where I think you signed one side of it and Luke Langley signed the other side of it. And then
that's valuable, man. Not because it's a Rey Mysterio mask, because Luke signed it.
Yeah. Well, because both y'all signed it, that's pretty cool stuff. And then my daughter got a hat at one of the shows and had you sign it. So, and then she has a poster up on her wall that has you on it too. So, yeah, you're a big name in this household.
Awesome, man. Well, that's great, man. That's awesome. I'm honored.
Yeah. No, it's we've all kind of made it a family event now, to where we're gonna all start trying to go to some more of the shows and everything. So far, I've only got to go to a few Crown shows. But I do want to come out to, some of the mid-states and also some of the Wrestling for a Cause. And I know you've done some work with them as well. I've had Tim Rockwell on here as well. And, we kind of talked about y'all's working relationship and stuff like that. And you work a lot the same way when it comes to wrestling. And so, that's it's nice to see all of these different companies that kind of intermingle and work with each other in this area.
Sure. I've known Tim, I'd say 15 years ago. Like, I actually had one of his first matches was against me at a NWA Oklahoma taping in, let's say it was Tulsa at Bell's Amusement Park. And he was just a young kid. I think he just graduated high school. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh my gosh, that was like so easy. He's like, he was so nervous. And I was like, it doesn't have to be complicated. I had already been in the business, for 10 years at that point. So I was, I guess, considered kind of a little bit of a veteran. But when Tim later on, started doing things and he started booking for a company, he called and he said, you are the first guy I'm calling. He's like, I want you to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. And he was booking for a company out of Stabenow in Oklahoma. And it was they did one show a month on Friday night. And for a town that there's nobody there, it's Mickey Mantle's hometown.
Oh, wow.
But there's like 200 people in the town, like 150 people. Mm-hmm. They would sell out this high school gym the first Friday of like every month of like 400 people.
Oh,
and
cool.
Jake Boulder and I were at him as the Old School Express. And basically it was just like a reincarnation of the Rock and Roll Express and we were good guys, the Midnight Express and we were bad guys. Mm-hmm. And we were over. And then we started feuding with Tim and his Uncle Bernie, Bernard Funk, and they were Texas Inc. Of course, they were heels in Oklahoma. We were the baby faces. Right. And Tim and I just always meshed really well. We had a similar thought process as far as putting matches together. Our working style was really easy. We complemented each other very well in the ring, but our minds clicked the same way with business. And there was a lot of times Tim would just sit in the back and be like, what do you do about, T-shirts this, and just little things, merchandise and stuff.
Right.
And I was always the first one. I liked somebody to take an interest in that stuff, and I liked helping him. And
Yeah.
I remember the first WFC show, I went and worked it. I went and I think I hosted the second one, but
Okay.
WFC is a great company, does some great stuff. And
Yes, it is.
Mid-States has been able to kind of, we complement each other. We try to line our dates up.
Mm-hmm.
The championship belts can go back and forth. I've been a tag team champion over there. The Johnnies are the longest reigning WFC tag team champions. They've defended them here at Mid-States, and that's not
Right.
a lot of companies will do that, have belts transfer. When I was a Southern Heavyweight champion, I defended it over there.
Mm-hmm.
I lost the belt to Tim. Tim defended it over here. We traveled, but to do that in this business, everybody's like, well, everybody should just work together. I'm like, you would think so, but there's egos that get in the way. There's conflicts and storylines that get in the way. And
Right.
Tim and I are just always on the same page. Whether we're in the same page as far as storyline wise, sometimes not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes he's the opposition of me, and
Right.
sometimes we're on the same page. But the styles, the way we run our company, pretty similar. We use a lot of the same talent, and there's times that he will have me come in and specifically work someone that needs help getting over in his company.
Okay.
And I take that as a huge, huge compliment that he can trust me in there with them and say, okay, here's what we do.
Right.
Or, there was a case I went over and worked during pandemic. They were one of the first companies that kind of started back running. And I went over and I worked a show, and he said, what do you think with this guy? And I said, he needs some work. And I said, why don't you let me work like a 3-show series with him and see what I can get out of him and try to elevate him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And what I always try to do, and any promoter ever books me, odds are your local guys that work there that are going to be on every show.
Yeah.
I'm not always going to be on every show that you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to, like a campsite, I try to leave it better than I found it.
Right.
So if I can go in and it's whether, pulling off a loss to a guy or getting him over, even with a win, getting him over in such a way, he's got to be there the next month. I may not be coming back for 6 months.
Right.
So I always try to leave it better than I found it. And I think he does the same when he comes down and wrestles for me.
Yes.
So we both hold each other in a level of respect, and we each hold each other's company at a level of respect. And we try to make sure that our priorities are, hey, my priority is Mid-States, but WFC is right up there at the top with it. And I make sure that I have, even when I can't do, or I have other engagements for WFC's running, I make sure that my students know that, their second priority is to this show. They're a big part of that. So we try to work together as far as scheduling our events. That way we want our guys to get as much work as we can. And you have guys like the Blue Bowl, that have went over there and won championships that I trained. And it's so it would be a disservice to him if I'm running a show the same day as WFC's running a show, and
Right.
the Johnnies are going to be, here and like, man, let's try to work this out. Because I know at one point our heavyweight champion was Luke Langley, which had his first match for Mid-States Wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And our champion was Luke Langley. He was a WFC champion at one time. And if we have a show on the same day, we don't want the guy having to say, I got to do this one or this one or this one. So we
Right.
try to make that happen as much, as we try to work together as much as we can. And there's sometimes that, you go to a venue to book a venue. It's not like you have your pick of every Saturday in the world. They may say, well, look, we've got a quinceanera booked in here on that day, or they've got a farmers co-op meeting in here on that day. So you can't have that. The only Saturday we have available in November is the 20th for you. You got to take it or leave it sometimes. So,
Yep.
But we do our best, and most of our dates kind of lined up. And there's been times where I've called in and been like, look, this is what I got. And it may be 3 months in advance. I'm like, this is the only day that I can have. And he's like, well, I've got that day, but you know what? Let me see if I can reschedule mine, because he's going to come over and work my show too. So we try to work together as much as we can. And there's sometimes that it's not all dates are going to line up, not all talent's going to line up, but we do our best to work together like that. And I think we have a huge amount of respect for each other. And I think that's a long period of time. You know, there's partnerships that can form, and they may last a year, they may last 2 years, and then there's differences.
Mm-hmm.
Even if Tim and I have our differences, we've managed to come back to each other for 10 or 15 years and work together strongly. So
Awesome.
I hold him in high respect, not just in the ring as one of my favorite opponents, but just as far as in business too. So great
Awesome.
guy.
Yeah. So speaking of, dates and stuff like that, do you have any that you would like to maybe announce that's going to be coming up for Mid-States Wrestling?
I've got kind of my calendar, and I try to post and try to keep everybody posted. I'm trying to do better as far as engaging everybody as my outside, because I try to think too that I had fans that sometimes I'll forget and just mention it the day before, but here's some just coming up over the next little bit. I urge Mid-States Wrestling is my home company. It's a lot of guys' home base. We had a lot of starts. I mean, I know, a lot of people started with Mid-States Wrestling.
Right.
And it's got its place. It's 20 years, and there's not any other independent companies out there, especially in the Midwest, that have been able to do that and run on the level that we've been able to run on. So I urge people, like, even there's people in Springfield that have never made it to a Harrison show, but then when they finally go, they're like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is it's the same talent, but there's actually a different level. And so I've urged Harrison fans to go to the Springfield shows, and they say the same thing. This is cool, but it's a little bit different, but it's awesome. So it's a matter of just giving it a chance. And it's only about an hour between, but it's sometimes, I call it Bizarro World, but sometimes, like a certain guy may be a heel in Missouri that's a babyface in Arkansas. But I'll give you the rundown. Saturday, August the 27th, I'll be in the Kansas City area for CSW, Central States Wrestling. Arn Anderson will be on that card. That's Saturday, August the 27th. Fast forward, we're going to skip family vacation. I won't announce that, and I'll keep that offline. September the 13th, September 14th, September 15th, September 16th, September 17th, I will be in Wichita Falls, Texas at 2 shows a day at the Texoma State Fair. That's the huge fair they have right on that Texas-Oklahoma border. I wrestle it every year for WFWA. That's Wichita Falls Wrestling Association.
Okay.
Myself, the Johnny, Gary Graham, oh goodness, Jimmy Fiasco, the Blue Bolt, we're all going to be there. And it's free shows. If you come to the fair, it's indoor too, which is great, and it's air conditioned. So that's, I think, Tuesday, September 13th through Saturday, September 17th. September the 24th, I do an annual deal that I host here in Harrison, Arkansas. It's their huge Demolition Derby. It draws about 5,000 people. I have been the MC for that event for 14 years now, I think, but I block it off every year for them. It's September 24th, the Demolition Derby, but it's a good day if you ever just want to meet and greet with me, you want to get an autograph, you want to take a photo. I don't have a wrestling show to run. I don't have a match to get ready for. I'm just emceeing it. So even if there's just fans that want to check out a really good time at the county fair at the Demolition Derby, I'll be out taking pictures with September 24th. September 26th through September the 30th, I'll be in Las Vegas, Nevada for the Cauliflower Alley Convention and Club out there for an award ceremony. And then I will have an event that I will announce that I'll be wrestling on there. Saturday, October 1st for WFC, I believe that is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Sometimes I'll scratch down WFC, but if they're running a different area, it's all Tulsa area kind of thing. Friday, October 7th, we are doing a huge Mid-States Wrestling event in Dodge City, Kansas for the Special Olympics, Kansas. It is a huge, huge, huge event that is for their area. I think it's like their southern champion or Special Olympics thing where all their athletes come from like 6 states, but already signed is Jimmy Hart. Myself, we will have a former WWF Hall of Famer on top of Jimmy Hart to be announced, and a huge, huge, huge surprise from current AEW roster. AEW roster will be there, and a WWE Hall of Famer. That will be announced as it gets closer. That's Friday, October the 7th. we'll have ticket information coming up to that. It will not be on the regular Mid-States page. Those tickets will probably be available through Ticketmaster. Saturday, October 15th, Mid-States Wrestling, Harrison, Arkansas. And let's see, Saturday, October 22nd, Wrestling for a Cause. I believe it is their anniversary show. That's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then the event we announced, I've got a few others in there I'll skip over. Saturday, November 12th, Mid-States Wrestling, Springfield, Missouri. It's myself, and for 20 years, the undefeated Stephen E. in a Springfield street fight. So I'm looking forward to that one. Can't wait to get my hands on Stephen E. once and for all. We've had fights over the years, but he's managed to beat me every time. He's remained undefeated, but finally get my hands on him one-on-one Saturday, November 12th, Springfield, Missouri. MSWtickets.com. If you want to get any of my merchandise, anything like that, SpaceCowboyWrestling.com. And just follow me on Facebook, Space Cowboy Jason Jones. And Instagram, I'm trying to be better on Instagram. I think I'm Space Cowboy Jason Jones 45 on there, but follow me on there. I'm the good-looking bald-headed dude in a satin jacket. Follow me on there. I'll try to only post event posters coming up from events that I've got going on and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, man, it has been awesome having you on this show. Is there anything else that you maybe want to say before I get you off here?
No, man, just wrestling fans, I want to say that I don't watch a lot of current product, but it's okay. Wrestling fans, it's okay to go to local events and support independent wrestling. Everybody gets their start there. If not, they're a fitness model that got handpicked to go to a power plant, or they're a Instagram model that got a contract. Support independent wrestling. I always notice that the people online that say negative stuff about independent wrestling, they've watched one other thing their whole life. Sometimes they go, it's not the matches that you're paying, it's the interaction with the crowd.
Right.
My dad used to take me when I was a kid, and we like to get seats about the halfway up because my dad really loved watching the crowd engage with the matches. He liked watching little old ladies getting mad and shaking their walking stick at people and stuff. He just used to get tickled at watching the crowd react to the matches. And I took that. I think that's why I enjoy booking things to get a reaction. But give it a chance. I mean, there's so many negative things that people will post a poster of, and they'll be like, oh, well, this girl's obviously a Sasha ripoff or something.
Yeah.
Give them a chance. Everybody started somewhere, you know. I mean, and if it's the independent wrestling show, I understand. Sometimes it'll burn it. I say a lot of times, people are like, why do you get so pissed about, a wrestling show running in this area? I'm like, because it's crap. I use this analogy. Last March, it was like the girlfriend had they sent her some reward, and she had a free pizza from Domino's. She's like, hey, let's order Domino's. I got a free coupon from Domino's. I'm not a big fan of Domino's pizza, right?
Okay.
I'm like, okay, order pizza. We get it. We both get food poisoning.
Oh, no.
And we hadn't eaten anything else, right? So we obviously get food poisoning from Domino's pizza. You think I wanted to eat Domino's for the next? Do you think I wanted to eat pizza in general for the next couple weeks? No. I belched it up for 3 days. So just because somebody puts independent or puts pro wrestling on a flyer, look into it. Make sure that it's actually wrestling.
Right.
Because sometimes you are comparing apples and oranges. Yeah. And if I go get a bad taste in my mouth and eat horrible pizza, well, I'm not going to go get good pizza down the road because I'm burned out on pizza, and I've been burned once. Yep. Be sure that you go to a good, reputable company. Like, I like when people go to crappy independent shows and then they come to a mid-state show and they're like, oh, my God, this is nothing like what we've been to before in the past. And you're like, yeah, because we set the bar high. Yeah. So, and some people don't know what to compare to, but give us a chance, and I guarantee you we will set the bar so high for independent wrestling shows. Not saying that you won't. We're going to go back and experience more, but we will always be the bar going forward that you will compare everybody else to. So that's what I'll leave you with.
That's awesome. Man, I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. It has been great, and hopefully I can get you to come back on in the future, because I feel like there's
Yeah,
a
we
ton of
didn't
stuff that we didn't get to talk about. What was that?
We didn't scratch the surface on a lot of stuff, did we?
Oh, I know. Yeah, that's what. But whenever you just got an hour show, there's only so much you can pack into it. So.
I understand, man. No problem, man. Try to make our next October show in Harrison if you can, man. I'd really appreciate it. I know you've only been to a couple events, but
Right.
I know I've been a part of a couple of those that you've been on. But, man, I promise you it's worth the hour and 15-minute drive. And if you bring your kiddos over, I'll make sure I send them home with some merchandise, okay?
Sounds good, man. All right. Well, you have a great night.
You too, buddy. Thanks again for having me on, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care, bud. Bye-bye.
In a time of inflation, COVID, monkeypox, and Amber Heard, you need to take a break from it all. Welcome to Love and Murder Podcast. With Love and Murder, you get 1 hour a week to kick back and listen to stories of relationships gone horribly wrong. Stories with true crime, mystery, suspense, and just a little bit of humor that's never at the expense of the victim. Come on, join hosts Kai and Shar over at www.murderandlove.com. That's Love and Murder backwards, murderandlove.com.
Hey everyone, this is Brian Ferguson. If you're listening to this, then I know you are enjoying the Bumps and Thumbs podcast. In order to continue to run the podcast and get guests on the show, we need support from people like you. Please go to anchor.fm/Brian, BRIAN -Ferguson, FERGUSON, the number 3, and click on the support button. Once you are there, you'll have options to select from to make a monthly contribution. Your support will help us get on wrestling stars that require financial compensation. Again, that's anchor.fm/Brian, BRIAN -Ferguson, FERGUSON, the number 3, and click on the support button. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support, and enjoy the podcast.
Fascinating people, fascinating places.
The weekly podcast available on all major platforms.
I definitely knew I was going to be an astronaut.
That coronavirus is a work of God.
There's a huge conspiracy at work.
There were a number of spies.
It straddles fantasy and reality.
It ain't so funny once the rabbit got the gun.
Houston, we've had a problem.
You're not a Christian, you're a liar.
All right, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed that episode with Jason Jones. That is one that I have been looking forward to happening for a while now. And I actually had a few issues this week. So what I usually do when I use Zoom is I'm able to convert it from one format to another. Well, the website that I've been using to do my conversions stopped working on me, and I was unable to get it. But luckily, with the program that I use to do all my editing, they had a plugin that I was able to put in to be able to change over the format. And I was able to get this out to you guys. We also had some issues every time Jason would try to come onto the Zoom meeting. It would say that it was an invalid code and things like that. So we ended up having to call in on the show and everything. So we did have some technical issues this week again, and I hope to have all of these bugs worked out soon and get things kind of back to normal. But I was highly pleased with this episode, and I hope that you guys were too. So I have some pretty cool episodes that are coming up over the next few weeks, and I can't wait to present those to you guys. So next week I have with me Joe Helms. He is a wrestler that I met in the last show that I went to. He's a really awesome guy, and he was recently doing some pretty cool stuff when I talked to him the other day that we'll be talking about on the show, and I can't wait for you guys to be able to hear that one. The week following that, I will be having on Christopher Allred, who is the owner and promoter of Crown Championship Wrestling. You guys have all heard me talk about Crown Championship Wrestling on just about every episode. So you will finally get to hear from the man who is the one who actually brings that to this area. But we will be talking about NCAA football. So I look forward to talking to him on that one. And then the week following that, I have the Iceman with me, and that is Howard Moritz. He is another wrestler that I have met and I've been able to talk to online and stuff like that, and kind of set this up to have him come on. And I am very excited to have him on to talk to him about wrestling and about how he got into the business and things like that. So, yeah, those are a couple of the episodes that I have that are coming up. I am very excited about presenting all of these to you guys. If you have any questions that you would like me to ask any of my guests that are going to be on, you can always send me an email. And my email address is giveadatapodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Facebook, and that's at IYGADAP. It's the acronym for If You Give a Data Podcast, or as I like to say, IGADAP. Or you can just look me up and just put in If You Give a Data Podcast. You can find me on Google, and usually the first, 15 results that come up on Google if you put in If You Give a Data Podcast is me. If you want to start listening to me on Alexa, you can even do that. You can find me on there. Just ask her to play the latest episode of my show, and she can do that. You can also follow me on Instagram, and that's at Give a Data Podcast. Also, you can follow me on Twitter, and that's at DadPodcast11. I update all of these regularly to tell you what's going on with the show. I have a few other ones that I have. I don't update those as regularly as I do those three. Those are my big three that I use mostly. So if you want to know what's going on with the show or what's going on with me, you can always look on there. Also, when you're listening to this episode, rate it and review it. Tell me what you thought of this episode. If there's something you would like me to do different, let me know. So I am going to bring this show to an end. I am very excited about where this show is going. Recently, I reached a new number on the show. So a few weeks ago, you heard me say that I had finally reached 1,000 downloads. It took me 4 months to get to 1,000 downloads. Well, I was able to double that number to 2,000 downloads in a total of 15 days. And that is all thanks to you people who listen and support this show. And I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate you so much. And I hope that you continue to listen and invite your friends. Tell them about this show. Share it with them. Let everybody know about it. Because the more people that listen, the better. And just try to share it and try to bring as many people in, like I said. So, all right. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful week. And I will see you next time. Bye. If you enjoyed our show, come back next week. Come on, guys. You know you want to come back. Might get some laughs. That was my show.